Hello, boys and girls. This week we are going to continue talking about adjectives. More specifically, we're going to talk about adjectives that compare nouns. So, an adjective is a word that we use to describe nouns, which of course nouns are a person, a place, thing, also ideas. And so, adjectives are words that describe. That's what we learned last week. Today in this week, we're going to extend on that and we're going to talk about adjectives that compare. Today specifically, we're going to talk about comparing just two things, and that means we're going to be adding the suffix er, ier, or we're going to use the word more in front of an adjective to compare two nouns. Add er to most adjectives that have one syllable. We can tell a syllable or how many syllables a word has by seeing how many vowel sounds it has. For example, the word adjectives has 3 different vowel sounds, and if you clap when you say each individual part of the word, you will be able to see how many syllables the word adjective has. So I'm going to do that with you all now. Adjectives. So we can tell that adjectives has 3 syllables. The word add, it has 1 vowel sound, so it has 1 syllable. The word syllable, it has 3 syllables. So for adjectives that only have 1 syllable, we will only have to add the suffix er. So green is an adjective, or can be used as an adjective, and then so when we add the suffix er, that makes it greener. Like, my grass is greener than your grass. That could be an example of a comparative adjective. Small, if you clap it out, small has 1 vowel sound. It's an adjective. When we add the suffix er to small, it makes the word smaller. And so I could say that my dog is smaller than your dog. That would be comparing 2 dogs, and that's why we use the suffix er. And we'll talk more about that on the 3rd day of our lessons. Tall. It has 1 syllable. And so all we have to do for this adjective is add the suffix er, which makes taller. You could say that Mr. Browning is taller than Miss Jones. Kind. And then we add the suffix, let's see how many syllables it has. Kind has 1 vowel sound. Again, we have an adjective that has 1 syllable. We add the suffix er, and the word is kinder. Young, it has 1 vowel sound. If we clap, when we say the word, we only clap once, young. And so we add the suffix er to make the adjective younger. I am younger than Mr. Calso. Here we are comparing me and Mr. Calso, our ages, and so that is when we use the suffix er is when you're comparing 2 nouns. For adjectives that have 2 syllables and end in y, such as happy, replace the y with I and then add er. For example, happy. We change the y on the end to an I and then add er. And of course, then it would be happier. I am happier today than I was yesterday. You'd be comparing my happiness to today from yesterday, and so it'd be comparing two things, and so that is a comparative adjective. And it also says 2 syllables. So let's see how many vowel sounds the word happy has. Happy. Very good. So 2 syllables, and it ends in y. We change the y to I and add er. Let's see other examples. Tiny. Tiny has how many syllables? Tiny. 2 syllables. So it has 2 syllables and ends in y. We change the y to I and add er. Tinier. Noisy. For noisy, we see how many syllables it has. Noisy. 2 syllables. It ends in y. So it meets the criteria here to change the y to an I and add the suffix er. Noisier. Messy. We change the y to an I and add ER because messy, again, has 2 syllables. Messy. So that would make the comparative adjective messier. I am messier than Mr. Calso, at least when it comes to eating. And every other way, I'm not messier than him. We add more before most adjectives that have 2 or more syllables. Now, adjectives that have 2 syllables end in Y, we follow the rule that is on this slide. Has 2 syllables, ends in Y. Change the Y to I and add ER. Now, on adjectives that are comparing 2 things that have 2 or more syllables that do not end in Y, we will add more in front of. So interesting. Interesting depends on how you say it. It technically has 4 syllables, but when we say interesting just in our everyday speech, it sounds like it has 3. So interesting, but really the correct pronunciation would be interesting, which is 4. Either way, it has more than 2 syllables, and it does not end in Y, so we say more interesting. We definitely do not say interestinger. Beautiful, beautiful. It has 3 syllables, and of course it does not end in Y, and it has more than 2 syllables, so we say more beautiful. We don't make the word longer by saying beautifuler. Modern, it has 2 syllables, does not end in Y, so over here we add the word more in front of it, more modern. Difficult, difficult has 3 syllables, and so we add the word more in front of it to make it a comparative adjective. So more interesting, more beautiful, more modern, more difficult would be comparative adjectives that would compare 2 nouns. So thinking questions to ask yourself when deciding how to spell or which comparative adjective to use. Does the adjective have 1 syllable? For most of these, we add just the suffix ER. Does it end in Y and possibly have 2 syllables? If that's the case, we may change the Y to I and add ER. Does the adjective have 2 or more syllables and not end in Y? In this case, we would use the word more in front of the adjective. Let's practice choosing the correct comparative adjective form. The younger, more young dog had more energy than the old dog. Well, here the original adjective would have been young. Young has 1 syllable, and so we would use the word younger. We would just add the suffix ER. The pottery was large, larger, more large than the arrowheads. Here the word large has 1 syllable, large, and so we just would add an R to the end. And it would have the ending ER, like we would need for it to be a comparative adjective. The Native American exhibit is moderner, more modern than the dinosaur exhibit. Here the word modern has how many syllables? Modern. It has 2 syllables, so we use the word more in front of it. More modern. Today is gloomier, more gloomy than, today is a gloomier, more gloomy day than yesterday. Well, gloomy would originally have 2 syllables, gloomy. It ends in Y, and so that would fit the rule to change the Y to an I and add ER. Gloomier. The grass isn't always greener, more green on the other side. Green is an adjective. It is how many syllables? Green. It's 1 syllable, and so we would use the suffix ER on it, and it would be greener. We would not say more green. We would say greener to compare the greenness of whatever 2 nouns we're talking about. So here, you are going to, hopefully you watched this video beforehand, and you are going to practice the skill on a quizzes. It's not very long, but just to give you a little bit of practice with this.